NA. And Peter Ndoro is in Kimberley this morning. The Northern Cape is in focus, and the Premier, Sylvia, is his guest, as well as some other provincial MECs for that State of the Province address. If I'm not mistaken, Peter, the theme, repositioning the Northern Cape for positive economic and social growth. A very good morning to you and all your guests.
A very good morning to you, Leanne, and good morning to everybody across South Africa, if you're watching us on SABC2, and of course the rest of the continent that are tuning in on Channel 404 on DSTV. Yeah, we're in Kimberley today, and I've got to tell you, in history, this place was a hive of activity, and I might even say that it might have been the economic hub of South Africa's economy at one time. A lot has happened since then, and in fact, we're a stone's throw away from one of their tourist attractions known as the Big Hole. So if you're ever in this part of the world and in Kimberley, that's something you've got to see. And over time, as I said, a lot of things have happened. The economy here, agriculture, mining still very important, but also has become, I guess, South Africa's hub of renewable energy, something that we'll be talking about in our conversation with the Premier, because yesterday the Premier delivered her State of the Province address, and she spoke about many issues that you can unpack with us via Twitter, and we'll be discussing that, and I'll introduce our panel that will be taking us through that. But as I said, we're in a very important part of the country. It's the largest province in terms of surface area, but the least in terms of population, so very sort of sparsely populated. But when we talk about the province and its contribution to this country's history, we talk about indigenous people. The people of the Northern Cape contribute immensely in telling the South African story, and perhaps that's something we'll touch on as well when we look at culture. All right, so let's meet the woman of the moment who delivered that State of the Province address, and say a very warm welcome to the Premier of the Northern Cape, the Honourable Sylvia. Thank you so much for joining us. Good to have you again on the program, and welcome to you.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning to you and to the viewers outside there.
Thank you so much. Next to you, we have the MEC for Health, the Honourable Colin, otherwise known as Mac Jack. Thank you so much, MEC, for joining us. I know that you've got other responsibilities perhaps we'll interrogate as well, but thank you for being on the panel. Welcome to you.
Thanks, Peter. And thanks for the viewers.
And next to you, we have someone who also sits with a very important portfolio, particularly given the challenges that we're facing, the MEC for Agriculture and Land Reform, the Honourable Norman Shushu. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to you, sir.
Good morning, Peter, and good morning to the viewers.
Right, Premier, let's start with you. Your speech ran into 30-something pages. Can you condense that down to a couple of sentences and say to the people that are watching on TV, what would you say were your big messages in terms of your State of the Province address yesterday?
We've realized, Peter, that it become very important to take the communities into our confidence regarding our plans to make sure that the current economic meltdown, and especially the issue of retrenchments and also the issue of the impact of commodity prices, that we as a provincial government are fully aware of our responsibility, but also to make sure that people understand in the economic context of South Africa and the world, the Northern Cape is not immune of what is happening globally, but that we as a provincial government have to make sure that we address the economic issues, that we take our people into confidence, and they understand that since our economy is built on a few issues like agriculture, mining, tourism, services, that is the economic activities, they must understand that, especially agriculture and mining, we are finding ourselves in the midst of a severe drought that is not only impacting on the province, but also on South Africa and on the Southern African region. And that is why we thought that we would focus on the economic side of the provincial message, but also to make sure we address issues surrounding education, because it's also a current issue. It's also, the people are also worried about what is happening on the education sphere. So that was the next objective for us, to make sure that we address that issue, but also to ensure we still encourage our people to live a healthy lifestyle. So we had to also address the issues around health, and also just to make sure crime and in general to make sure that our people are with us on the trajectory that we are now actually embarking on as a province, and also that our people understand that we can do as much and that we need them to take our hands, but also that we need the private sector to ensure that the Northern Cape still remains a going concern.
All right. Well, talking about going concern, I'm going to ask you a question that I asked the President about a week ago. And I said on a scale of 1 to 10, just so that we can have a sense of the state of the province, where would you say we are? How healthy are we, or how unwell are we? On a scale of 1 to 10, where would you place the Northern Cape state condition?
I don't know what exactly you want me to address, but I would say...
Overall, so if you take everything into consideration, the economics, the social, the cultural, everything, all the dynamics, how well are we doing, or how challenged are we? If a scale of 1 to 10, if we're 3, that means we're in trouble and we really, really need to do something. If you're 10, that means you're perfect and you don't have to change anything or fix anything. So where are we, do you think?
Someone once said to me, if you always regard yourselves as the underdog, it will always challenge you to do better. That is why it will be difficult for me to give us a score, because people must give us a score. But I would say my observation over the past 2 years is that more and more there is that kind of satisfaction that you observe. Unfortunately, it is like mixed. People will say, yeah, but we are not satisfied with local government, but you at provincial government level, you are fine. So we are putting everything in to make sure that our citizens are satisfied with the kind of services that we are rendering to them. But we are also making sure wherever we go, because we make sure that at least every quarter we visit one of our districts so that people can see us, they can feel us, they can experience us. So I can say we are in touch with our communities. So generally, let's say healthy enough to be worried, but not so unhealthy that you need to cry about it.
Okay, that's a good answer. And then just before I move to our MECs, I'm seeing a trend that's starting to sort of creep in. Before, and as you tried to present your State of the Province address, there were disruptions by opposition parties. And I just want you to share your thoughts with us, because this is a thing that we're starting to see a lot more of, but it wasn't something that we've known this province in particular to have. There always seemed to be some kind of dialogue always with the opposition parties. What's changed, and is this a concern for you?
It would have been a concern if it was having the necessary impact, but it is becoming an irritation, especially for the people of the province. Because let me just cite an example. In November, the last week, we had a house sitting in Douglas, and this member of this party, we were voting on our budget votes, and in every vote he was just saying, "I object, I object." What are you objecting to? No, I object. What are you objecting to? No constructive input. So I think people should think, if someone cannot make a constructive input where he is representing ourselves, what can we do with that thing? For me, it's not even a concern, because even in the debates, there is nothing constructive. If they speak about land, but they cannot come up with a plan, do you have a policy? Do you really have a plan? How can we work together? Because the one thing of this province, even opposition parties, we can work together, and we used to work together. We must differ, because everyone wants to have the support of the people, but our people's issues cannot be made a joke of, and that is exactly what I think these people are doing.
All right, so yesterday, my understanding is that he felt that you'd insulted him earlier. Is that true?
The person who raised it was not even present in the house sitting, and the person that was present never sat long enough. He just came in to object and went out as if Iman was phoning him to say, "You object again," and then he came to object and then he go out. So you didn't even have time to say something to any one of them.
All right. Okay, a lot to unpack in your speech, but one area that we'll talk about, and I want you to put your economic hat on, because that's a really big issue for, as MEC, the Premier was saying that, because of the global environment that we're finding ourselves in, what would you say have been the big challenges in terms of developing the economy of the province, and perhaps some of the solutions that came through the Premier's speech yesterday?
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. Let me first start the basics. The basis of any economy to grow is three fundamental issues. It's SMME development, it's long-term planning, skills development. And taking all those things into cognizance is precisely what the Premier emphasized. If you look at some of the challenges that we're faced with, the imminent retrenchments that are about to take place in the mining area, and if you look at the drought that is facing us in agriculture, those are the challenges that we're faced with now. How do we really respond to that? How do we cushion those job losses that might be coming? And that is what we are trying to prepare ourselves to. That is what we are trying to engage. Civil society, we are engaging labor unions. We are also then engaging the mining houses as well as organized agriculture to say, ultimately, what is your plan? Because they ought to have a plan to say, how are they going to implement the retrenchments? And Tina, we want to discourage them to start to say, do we have alternatives to absorb, to cushion the losses that might be coming through? The other matter that we are preparing ourselves for is the whole question of skills development amongst the young people. Because as you would understand, the demands of the market are of such an extent that we do not have the adequate skills needed by the markets at this point. That's why the university comes in. That's why we are trying by all means as the government to provide bursaries for our kids in order for us to ensure our young people are having the necessary skills that are needed by the economy that are going to assist us growing the economy going forward. But again, what we are doing is long-term planning. You would understand, in any country, in any organization, in any institution, you need to have your plans in place in order for you to start to say, when I reach this point, I think the Premier spoke about, we are right in the center of turbulences here. And how you really manage your issues out of those turbulences is important here. We are then saying, let's have a plan similar to the Blue IQ of Gauteng, similar to what KwaZulu-Natal is doing, in order for us to say, what do we really do to maximize on our comparative advantage? Amongst those issues, how do we really utilize the question of available land? How do we available the spaces that we utilize the spaces that we are having? How do we really ensure that we maximize in terms of the cooperation that is there amongst people of the Northern Cape in order for us really to insert that in our plan in order for us then to mitigate some of the challenges that we'll be faced with. And to me, that is what we are preparing ourselves for.
All right, we'll unpack some of the action plans that you have and highlighted in the SOPA yesterday. But we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll hear from the MEC for Agriculture and Land Reform. As you know, the drought has affected most of our provinces, and this being an agricultural province, certainly have been feeling that as well. We'll find out a little bit more about that right after this.